Mute. Let's see. Mute. Ah, there we go. Let's see. Mute. Ah, there we go. Let's see. Okay. Looks like we've got everything kind of set. All right. Looking kind of good.
Nope, I forgot my water.
Dang it. You went to go get your water and you never got it.
Brought it this far past the hallway.
You know what? Kudos to you for getting it that far.
Yeah. It's something. Don't tired shame me, Tina.
I would never. I would never. You are absolutely fine. All right, so I did check the mic to ensure that we are heard. We are no longer muted.
Sweet.
So I don't really have a lot on the Korshkan Empire, I will be frank. With the Grommelkin, I kind of knew a little more on what I wanted to do for them. But the Korshkan Empire, they kind of... I was like, Russians. That was like the only word that I could think of. But
Because
Korshkan
sounds Russian.
It does sound Russian. So,
well, я знаю по-русски.
don't start talking to me about that. I don't even know. I don't even know.
I know Russian.
I know you. Well, you lived in Russia for.
That's what I said.
You lived in Russia.
No, I said I know Russian.
You know Russian.
Я знаю по-русски.
See, now that's beautiful.
Я знаю Россия. I know Russia.
Oh, you know Russia. Oh my God! Now I'm bashful. They're talking all sorts of languages here. My God, I can't keep up.
I can teach you some curse words.
You can. Oh, I would be interested.
Atiebi suka.
Okay.
F off. B word.
F off. B word.
I don't know how explicit you want me to be.
I don't think monetization. We don't have that here. We don't get paid for this. Yeah, no. You can get as detailed as you please because we don't get paid.
Well, like, are you looking for like old school Russia before the Cold War, like the czars, or are you thinking that they've kind of followed a similar path to modern day Russia, where they have the history of the czars and they attempted to industrialize? It went horribly, horribly wrong, and now you have a couple of really wealthy ones and some like resistance groups.
See, the thing is I don't know a lot about their culture or their history, so I have no idea what a czar is.
They're so interesting.
Please detail it to me because I would like to know.
Okay, so before the communists came and fucked it all up, Russia was it had like, and I think the tragedy in all of it is that the only Russia we know as a Western country and in the modern world is Cold War Russia.
Okay.
And
that's like the only version I know. And
they still kind of are that. And that's why, like, in Russia, you don't smile at each other, which would probably be, like, perhaps an important part of the, what are they called? Korshkan?
Yeah, the Korshkan. And actually, I did, so when I looked up Russian culture, I did actually notice that there were a couple taboos, and I wonder if I kept any of those two taboos. I know for a fact that I wrote down a couple of holidays, and the fact that they're not allowed to smile, and that they're just very rigid individuals.
So that's a result of Soviet living and KGB life,
Mhm.
because if you smiled at somebody, then a KGB officer could come and just like take you off the metro like that, or you would just disappear because they would think that maybe you were communicating like some sort of secret language, or if you like talk to people randomly,
Yeah.
they don't know, are you trying to question me? Are you trying to find something out? So they're very untrusting of people not in their group.
Okay.
And it takes a very, very long time to break down those walls and get them to trust you, because for nearly a century, that was daily life. You didn't trust anybody.
Okay.
And even the people you thought you could trust
you
could turn on you if like the KGB.
That's
came in.
interesting.
And so I think like we kind of have a cartoonized view of what it is.
Yeah.
Because it's in like so many like spy movies.
Yes.
So I think it's kind of like they say, why can't we understand like when we discuss a genocide in Darfur? Why is it so hard for people to feel worse about 2 single children dying than we feel about 1 million people dying?
Mhm.
Because one is such a giant, grandiose number that your brain can't really process it.
Yeah.
And it almost cartoonizes it, kind of like Russian life, like where we have this sort of media view of it. We don't really get what it's like.
Because we haven't lived there.
And like we sort of think that it's just hyperbole at this point.
Yeah.
Like it's just, that wasn't real. But it was so fucking real.
God, and I don't even know half of it.
And that's why, like, if you spoke to people on the metro, you were looked at as weird. Or if you were laughing with your friends, it was strange. And the younger generation who didn't grow up with that, you can see this huge gap in culture in Russia.
Yeah.
Because the younger generation didn't have that. They didn't have to wait in lines for toilet paper. And, like, they didn't have that sort of harsh life.
Yeah.
That even their parents and some older siblings had. Like, I worked with people who were maybe only a few years older than me at the time, and they grew up in all of that.
Wow.
And so I just, it looks like a very hard culture, and it is. You have to be very hard to survive there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of it is just a reaction to the life they had to live for so long.
Okay.
But not smiling in public, not talking to strangers in public, that's a huge part of Russian culture.
That's what I figured.
Especially in Moscow. It's different in St. Petersburg, a little bit. They're more westernized because it's more of a tourist city.
Yeah.
And it was built by the czars as kind of a playground.
Yeah.
So it was much more beautiful and colorful. And Moscow was the seat of Soviet communism. So it kind of was affected the most.
Mm-hmm.
And everything is just very gray
Oh.
and beige.
Oh,
and that's
wow.
real fun in the winter when the sky is also very gray.
And beige.
Yes. So everything is gray.
So what is a czar?
The czars were the rulers of Russia.
Okay.
Kind of akin to a king.
Okay.
It would be like a king in a royal family.
Gotcha. Okay.
Except in Russia, they were czars. Like Tsar Nicholas and Anastasia was the Duchess. Have you ever seen the movie?
Yes, that's actually one of my favorite movies. And I figured that was from Russia.
Yes.
So.
And like very classic Russian storytelling too, I think.
Yeah.
Like their fairy tales are really, I love Russian fairy tales.
Russian fairy tales are kind of my favorite, like with Baba Yaga
Mhm.
and with Rasputin and all that. Like those are kind of.
There's
like,
a very
I love
good
those.
darkness.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of the hero's journey to kind of formulations of how stories work were kind of played in those folk tales as well. So
Yeah. And in Russia, like that folk feeling is
Yes.
a very big part of their society.
yeah.
Like they haven't lost that, which is my favorite. Like I love Russian folk art and Russian folk music, and like they have such a deep connection to that still, which is really cool to see because so much of that was stripped from them.
Yeah.
Like culture wasn't really a thing.
So what's the difference between the period with the czars and the period where they felt like they couldn't trust each other? So like what was the cause of that?
Communism.
Okay, so that was communism.
And like they were a hard people before because to live in a country that fucking cold.
Yeah.
Like Germany, Hitler could not invade it because it was so big and so cold.
Yes, I remember that.
His army died trying.
I think like he had to turn back at one point.
Yes, and it's because it's massive.
Yeah.
And most people only live in a few parts of it. But like if
the
you
majority of it's more wilderness, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you live in one of the smaller towns, like I worked with this girl, Irina, who to stay warm in the winter, her mom would actually rub alcohol all over her.
Oh wow.
I mean, when I say alcohol, obviously vodka.
Vodka, yeah, exactly.
She would rub vodka on her to help keep her warm because it actually like burns your skin and it does keep you warm.
Oh wow.
In the winter because like that's how freaking cold it is.
Yeah.
So I think they were always a very hardy, like just staunch sort of people. And then in communist theory, you're supposed to industrialize and be democratic, then become communist so that you have something. It's like investing in a house with no money.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying communism works, because anything that looks perfect on paper is probably shit in theory or in actual action, because it doesn't take into account human nature.
Yes, it doesn't.
But for it to have a chance of working, you have to have democratized first.
Yeah.
And you have to have industrialized. You have to have something to invest in it to disperse among the people.
So instead, what they did is they skipped straight from monarchy right into communism. How did that transition look? Did you know about that? Like, do you know how that fell into things?
I only knew anything about Russian culture before I went from, like, Russian folk music that I and because I studied the Holocaust a lot in middle school and in high school. I don't know why.
I mean, it's a very interesting topic, though.
Yeah, and as a kid who was Afghan, who couldn't tell anyone they were Afghan, like at a Catholic school, and like no one knew I was Afghan.
Yeah.
I think there's something about like people being in hiding that kind of spoke to me.
Yeah.
That I weirdly related to. But I learned a lot about Russia through that.
Yeah.
So I'm not like an
well-versed in it. Yeah.
on Russian history. But we had to learn about it a lot too in international studies. And the biggest mistake they made was not taking the proper steps. They rushed it. And so they had nothing to disperse amongst the people.
Yeah.
Stalin, however, as horrible as he was, I mean, he killed more people than Hitler did. It's just not as well documented.
Yeah.
He was so hardcore, he did catch them up a lot.
Yeah.
But they were just farmers before
everything else. Like, they weren't even really...
So while the rest of the world was industrializing and the rest of the world was kind of coming into a modern era, Russia was still trying to not be farmers.
Yeah.
And they just jumped so many steps ahead that it didn't work.
Okay.
And so then for the people that it did work for, it was a very small group of privileged people.
Yeah.
And that's where they took power and they took advantage of the entire situation. And you had people waiting in bread lines. However, the older generations, while I was in Russia, there was actually a communist march when we were in Red Square one day. It's the most Russian thing ever. And like they came down with the sickle and axe flags that they were carrying, which in Russia to this day, there's a sickle and axe everywhere. It was put on everything. You're never going to get rid of it. Yeah. They will have the communist aesthetic forever. It's not a pretty one, but
no.
Which is really disappointing because traditional, again, like what the modern world knows of Russia, it's really depressing compared to traditional Russia because it was so gray. They use bright, beautiful colors. Yeah. And like Russian culture is actually very bright and beautiful and colorful. Yeah. But communism squashed that because it like squashed the individual. But like, you have St. Basil's Cathedral, which is just a gorgeous church, like a gorgeous cathedral. It's full of colors and beauty. And like they have so many buildings like that survived. But for the most part, it's just gray.
That's actually really sad.
But we saw a march there, and it was the older people marching because at least in communism, the one thing they all had was they all had health insurance and they were all guaranteed some sort of food. Yeah. Whereas now it's kind of like you make it yourself. So there's ups and downs to it, but you still have an older generation that misses that weirdly.
I mean, that makes sense though, because they lived with it for so long. And like that was their normal.
Was ingrained in you.
Yeah. That was ingrained in them. I think if I were to say, I think I like the idea of the Korshkan Empire because I do see them being that hard, untrusting group of people. And I feel like they would be more of that aesthetic if they had the communism bit into it. So that shift from kings into straight communism.
And it does create for a very broken society.
Yeah. And like it would make sense why their prisons or anything along those lines would be god awful. And that's what Inky had gone through.
Gulags.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is. You're going to have to describe that to me.
So in Russia, they have the Russian gulags.
Okay.
Which are mostly, like, a lot of them are in, like, Siberia.
Yeah.
And that's, like, it's just so cold that I feel like you could leave all of the doors open and no one would escape because where are you going to go?
Yeah.
You'll die.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
It's just genius. Use the elements to your advantage.
Yes.
No one does that as well as the Russians.
And at least if you stayed, you were guaranteed some form of warmth, maybe, and like food at the very least.
Yeah. But I do really love Russian culture, and I think it's a shame that more people don't know about real Russian culture.
Yeah.
And we just know like what we see in TV and movies.
And see, that's why I wanted to know more because of course, yes, I am making a race based off of them, but I didn't want to take that cartoonized version of them. I want to take what is actually part of Russian culture and instill that into the race itself.
And when you do get to know them, like they were all really warm. You know, on the outside, it's kind of like all the buildings on the outside look cold
and gray.
But if you go into somebody's home, it's different. And like when you would get to know them and like finally break down all the millions of walls, they were really warm and funny and like
cute and endearing.
I don't know about that.
No, not so cute and endearing. More drunk than anything.
It's not fair to make blanket statements about everybody. The people I knew, but like the people I knew that were open and like trying to not be what they had been raised to be were really warm and awesome. And you had a huge mix of people who were just very starchly xenophobic, and it was hard to embrace the culture while I was there.
Yeah.
And it made me understand why a lot of people in America have problems with like living in America and why they're so frustrated.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to embrace a culture that doesn't embrace you.
Yes. Yeah.
And you could, you know, I learned Russian pretty quickly and I was picking it up really fast, but the longer I was there, the meaner people were, the less incentivized I was to learn.
Yeah.
And I kind of just gave up. And it kind of made you understand why some people just don't want to learn English. Because it's like, you treat me like shit.
Yeah, and I know a lot of American people that do that, where like if somebody's speaking a completely different language, they get frustrated and angry.
Yeah, and it taught me to have a lot of patience with people who don't speak English firsthand, because I've seen so many people at work get frustrated with them.
Yes.
And they don't want to help them. And I'm like, they're trying to speak your language, and I know that's very difficult.
Yeah.
And so if you can get anything out, hey, kudos to you, because it took me a long time to learn how to get that much out.
Yeah.
And like, it's really hard, and it's intimidating when someone's not supportive of you when you're trying, because it just doesn't, it makes you not want to try.
Yeah.
Kind of shuts you back down.
Yeah, because frustration does make you shut down. And it's actually the main reason why people cry. Frustration is one of the main top reasons why people cry.
You don't cry in public.
I know. I imagine you don't. That's a sign of weakness.
That's another thing. There are no, like, you know, in America, we're all ADA compliance, and that's not a thing.
No?
I don't know about now. I haven't been there in like a decade.
Yeah.
But there were no, like, every once in a while you would see going out from the metro, because I mean, these were built a very long time ago.
Yeah.
There would be like these metal, kind of like thin metal bars that went up the stairs, and they were like just rusty and old, and you could push a stroller up that, or you could, if you're lucky, have somebody push a wheelchair up that.
Yeah.
But you didn't see people with handicaps in Russia.
Oh, wow.
Not to say that they didn't exist,
but they were
didn't
not
see it.
Yeah.
Which like it took us like 2 months of being there and we started to go. It's kind of interesting. You never see anybody in a wheelchair. You never see people like, you have the women who fight with people over a handicap spot.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
You could be missing 2 legs and you better figure out a way to get the fuck around.
Holy shit.
And I saw that. Like,
and of course with the snow and the ice and the no salting or anything of the ice.
Yeah. It's just kind of a very
like you pick yourself up and figure it out.
Survive or don't survive.
Yeah.
And like I think it's not that they're wrong, it's just that's a part of their culture. Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of people have to understand. And like I think that would be something about the society in your story, that because of the way their lives have been, they might seem really harsh. And to the eyes of someone who hasn't lived that life, they seem like assholes. But it's like, but because of the way we've had to live as survive or don't survive, and sometimes you just have to accept that and move on.
And that kind of makes sense. It almost kind of makes me think about like how they might have grown even from the stages of even tribal too. Because like you just imagine being in that kind of weather, that kind of environment. Like you either move forward or you don't.
And I think that's true of most cold weather societies, like frigid, like, I mean, there's villages where they would leave the old at a certain age off on an iceberg.
Yeah.
Because you just can't afford to, you have such limited resources, you can't afford to spend that. And like,
so yeah, that makes sense. And so now I'm thinking about it. What if the Korshkan Empire never terraformed their reef?
It'd be interesting.
Like they just never terraformed it. Like they just, that whole area, they just had to learn to survive on it.
I think that would be really cool to see, because it shows that you don't have to change your environment to live. Sometimes you have to change yourself, because you can't change every environment.
Yeah.
You can only do so much. You can't change Siberia. It's Siberia.
It's Siberia. And like perhaps the reef that they found, they thought at first that it was, hospitable, something that they could survive on.
Right.
And it just kind of, and I almost kind of see it like perhaps they might have gotten it to an extent where they would be able to breathe on it.
Yeah.
But other than that, they couldn't, they kept running into things that caused them to not be able to fix the reef that they into what they wanted.
Well, that's one thing I love about Russian architecture, because everybody talks about like the domed buildings, especially their cathedrals. They look like onions. Oh. And the reason they dome up like that is because it snows so much that the snow would actually cave the roofs in. Oh. If your roof is flat,
it would go straight in.
So they made domed,
almost like igloos.
Yeah, and so they have a lot of buildings there that go like that,
straight like
so that the snow falls
on the
off
other
of
end
it.
Of it. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So we're getting somewhere here. Let me go ahead. I'm gonna have the major rulers a thing that we talk about after we discuss details about the world itself that they live in. So I like the idea of their reef not being fully terraformed. And it being kind of like it was made breathable, but not livable. If that
Unless you are them.
Yes. Yeah. So it is breathable, but
not hospitable.
Not hospitable. Yeah. So it is often cold. And I mean, with oxygen, with atmosphere, there will always be, snow. As long as there's water and there's cold temperatures, there's going to be frost and there's going to be snow. And there's going to be things like that. So, of course, they're going to have the cold, snow.
I could see them like really relying on fishing, like ice fishing and barging to get things around, like in the cold waters. Like that's a big thing in Russia, is they ship things by water.
Yes. Yeah. So maybe even to the extent like that would be interesting. Like a good portion of the reefs almost kind of being split up, but it's being split up through ice.
That'd
in
be
a way.
cool.
Yeah. Okay, so reef is split but connected
By ice.
by ice.
Oh, it'd be cool if they had like lots of ice bridges and stuff.
Yeah.
And in like Russia, they don't, because they were communist for so long, they didn't celebrate Christmas, but they celebrate New Year's like nobody's fucking business.
Really?
Yes. And instead of like saying Merry Christmas, you say, and forgive me if I butcher the pronunciation, but you won't know.
Yeah, I mean, not many of us will, but there might be one Russian person who will see this one day and go, ah!
But they say S Novim Godom, which means with New Year. So it's like Happy New Year.
Okay.
So instead of Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, you say S Novim Godom to everybody.
Aw.
You say Happy New Year.
Snovum Golem.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you say it, or is that an accent kind of bad?
I don't remember. It's been a long time.
I like that though.
Yeah. So they love New Year's, and they have a different sort of Santa. He's called Dad Moroz, which I just think that's the two most depressing English words you can put together. So I love that that's Santa.
So Dad Moroz.
Dad Moroz.
That's kind of dope.
And he goes around with his cousin or his niece, who is an ice princess, and she is blonde and wears a blue dress and is very icy.
Huh. But he's still kind of like Santa.
He's still basically Santa. He's just called Dad Moroz.
That's kind of dope. Okay. I kind of like where this is going with them, because I love the idea of, and I also really want to delve into like folklore with them too. I love their folklore. So do they have anything that would be considered demonic, or something that they would absolutely fear or not go near in any way, shape, or form?
I mean, nowadays, Americans.
I mean, that's not wrong.
I don't know a lot about like demonic taboos in Russian culture.
Yeah.
Weirdly, it's not something I've researched, but they're almost extensively, if they have a religion, they're either Jewish or Eastern Orthodox, Catholic.
Okay, so either Jewish or Eastern Orthodox, which is interesting. Which both technically still have
The same sense
of demon, and also the same sense of what God would be.
Yeah, but Eastern Orthodox religion is so different from
Jews,
regular Catholicism.
Oh, I have no idea.
But their temples and churches and stuff are so pretty. Eastern Orthodox, they have like more pictures and stuff everywhere.
Now that's interesting, because like in Jewish, they
colorful.
don't. Not only are they colorful, but they don't do imagery for that kind of stuff. They actually do mosaics and geometric patterning due to the fact that they believe that if you were to capture the image of God, it's considered blasphemy, because it's a human appropriation of what God is.
Yeah, I never went into. There's not a lot of Jewish temples that I came across in Russia, but I think a lot of that's because they suffered a lot in Russia.
Yeah.
And it's still not, they're just very xenophobic. If you're not of them and what is deemed socially acceptable, you're not okay. Like Romani,
and they're not okay with you.
Romani in Russia are very looked down upon. They're not treated well. Like sometimes killed.
Yeah.
And if you are blonde, you're golden. They love you. I didn't have a good time.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so we can definitely say that they have a xenophobic opinion.
Very xenophobic.
And, societal norms of the individual.
If
they have to like mold to it, essentially.
We told everyone we were Canadian.
Oh, really? Yeah, then they would like you because you'd be French.
Yeah, or Asian, I would speak French in public instead of English.
Yeah.
Because I actually went into a restaurant once where we spoke English, and I didn't even ask for the English menu because we knew how to order in Russian, but they heard us speaking English. And we sat there for like 45 minutes. Now in Russia and in like countries where you don't tip, it's typical to sit for like 20 minutes without any service, which is fine.
Yeah.
But we sat there for like 45 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And we're not addressed. And it was made very clear that was intentional.
Wow.
So I
That's
left and told them all to fuck off in Russian.
Holy shit.
But that kind of stuff happened. And if you were a person of color and working at the embassy, they would specifically tell you to be very careful and not go off the compound by yourself because you would be hassled. And I had one friend over there. She was on temporary work. And she came into the store. I don't know how. I like to think of myself as punk Jesus at the time. People would come in and like vent their entire life to me when I worked at the store there. And she told me she went to a bar and ordered a drink, and she heard the bartender say something, and she asked one of the people she was with, and they had mentioned something about her color. And he hawked a loogie in her drink before giving it to her, and she watched him do it. And
oh my God,
she just left. And I had friends there that were Russian, like raised in Russia, but like one of the girls I worked with, what's her name, Yulia, she was also Korean.
Yeah.
And she was stopped constantly by the militia and the polizia. And they would question her just to question her because she wasn't white.
Wow. That's
and
fucked up.
like they would behead people there were a lot of people there from Kazakhstan just working. And like they would find their heads in dumpsters sometimes.
Holy fucking shit.
So there's a lot of xenophobia.
That actually makes me kind of concerned about Inky. And the main reason being is that he's Romani, technically.
They're also very homophobic.
Oh, God.
And I'm not saying that as a blanket statement, because I think a lot of the younger generation has access to the world outside.
Yeah.
But I met a girl who, when she came to America, was horrified and stunned that not everybody spoke Russian. Because she told me, and this was one from a smaller town, they're made to believe that Russia's the center of everything.
Oh, wow.
And that like everybody speaks Russian. And I can understand it because of the stretch of the Soviet Union and because so many people around them do speak Russian.
Yeah.
But that's what they're made to believe. So, you know, I think the younger generation has access to more information.
Then the older
So you don't believe just what like your government has told you.
Yeah.
But overall, it was a very, while I was there, not to offend anybody, but while I was there, they were very, very, very homophobic.
Yeah.
Like on a dangerous level.
I kind of could see that, though. I can definitely see that. Especially with the fact of how their societal norms sort of sit. Even.
Yeah.
Like, they don't come across as an individual or a group that would be, you know.
Yeah. They would possibly respect the views of like the Westboro Baptist Church, but not because they're so loud about it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, it was very just all around phobic.
Yeah.
Non-white
If
Russian
you're
phobic.
not me, you don't belong.
Yeah. And even I had a hard time sometimes because like people thought I was Romani. I had some people like question me about it.
Oh my God.
It was like just because I look kind of like vaguely ethnic.
Yeah.
Like, and I didn't tell anyone I was Afghan.
Yeah.
Because they also don't like the Afghan. Well, to be fair, nobody likes Afghans.
I mean, they kind of stain the name, yes.
Yeah, nobody at all likes Afghans. So,
well,
that
I like
wasn't
you, Jade. I like you.
That was not a Russian exclusive thing.
Yeah.
But they did fight the Afghans for like 10 years.
I did not know that.
Yes.
Okay.
They fought for 10 years in Afghanistan, fought them off.
No.
Because
Wow.
they were trying to like colonize that whole area. Like Azerbaijan is right near them.
Yeah.
And they were trying to get everything into the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
But Afghanistan fought them off only to then fall to the Taliban.
Oh,
and that's when everybody fled. And what people don't know, on a side note, is that Afghanistan was a very modern culture before the Taliban. and Islamism, which is different from Islam. Islamism is the radical version.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they were all forced to be something that they really weren't.
Oh, that's awful.
But Russia and Afghanistan had a big fight.
That
for a long
actually would be
time.
nice to detail on because I have the cut, which are kind of the Afghan but / Egyptian. I just kind of have like this Middle Eastern sort of collection.
Racist asshole.
I know I did. I'm such a bitch. But I did kind of create that sort of ideal because I didn't really know what race I wanted to bind them to, but I also loved the idea of like the Misio or the Reef of Emmerich still having like ruins and remnants of when the cut had come
Right.
and kind of conquered them. And they still have like pyramids even.
That's
here and
pretty
there.
cool.
So I always liked the concept of that. So
Yeah.
but that's actually something interesting to sort of play into.
Yeah. It's it made it for fun times living in Russia.
Fun times, yes. You sure you want to go back?
I would love to go back and see what it looks like now. Like,
yeah, to see if it's changed.
It would be really hard though and sad, like because when I was there, Medvedev was pretending to be prime minister.
Mm-hmm.
I say pretending because Putin was still like head of state.
Yeah.
And like within 2 years of us leaving, Putin just said, "Fuck it, I'm not going to pretend anymore.
Oh my
I'm
God.
still the leader." And I just don't think anything will ever change with him in power where he is because he's former KGB. Like he is an old dying system.
Yeah.
That will never help anybody thrive. Russia could be such a big superpower, which is frightening.
Yeah, I believe it though. I believe it.
They have so many natural resources, but they just use it to fuck with everybody.
They kind of do. And I mean, I even researched on all of the natural, and they have a lot of metals. They have a lot of metals, a lot of minerals.
Natural gas,
yes,
oil.
Yes. They have a lot of that stuff up there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, they have so much shit.
yeah. They've got a ton of shit. Which
Mostly,
is going to be
they have
fun.
really good cabbages.
They have good cabbages. That's wonderful. That's good to know.
Great potatoes.
Okay, so what are the prisons called again?
Gulags.
Gulags. Okay. I mean,
Those are like the Russian work camps.
Okay, Russian work camps, and more or less the only thing that was keeping the prisoners there was the elements.
I mean, I'm sure there's some pretty stringent
Guards and such.
guards, but like also the elements are so severe, it's so well placed that okay, run. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
I don't see Pinky as being a master survivalist. No offense to Pinky.
No, Inky is not in any way, shape, or form. I mean, he came from a Romani whaleback world, and so he originally, I mean, his family were kind of like con artists, and so they just ran in the family, and like they were drug addicts, they were con artists, and he was one that was left to sort of pick up the family and just move forward. And so the only way he could truly do it as a street kid was to steal.
Yeah.
And so he did it through those means, and then eventually their world was actually attacked by a void shark. And him and Macy were like of the very few that managed to survive and float through the sea space to survive.
I love that you have void sharks.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a hardcore cool thing to have.
They're legit sharks with black holes. Yeah.
I love that so much.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how I view them, though. Like, they are, in a way, like a black hole. They'll eat anything,
and then it's just gone.
and it's just gone. It's absolutely just gone.
That's terrifying.
Right?
Like, hey, Raw Happy, the void shark might come and take you today.
And that's like one of the many things that the Romani do face is that there are often times where an entire tribe will just disappear.
That's just horrible.
Entire ships just disappear.
That's crazy.
And that is a severe and true danger in the sea space.
Now, when the shark eats them as like a void shark,
Yeah.
do they go through a black hole type thing, or are they consumed in its stomach like it's eaten them?
It's like a black hole kind of thing.
Do you have a scientific theory in your story of what happens when something goes through a black hole? Is it like compressed and destroyed?
Yeah.
Or is it transported?
I never really liked the idea of it being transported. I always thought that the idea of being stretched so thin to be pulled apart was so terrifying to me. And that is what I like about the Void Shark so much, is because of that terror. Is that you aren't teleported, you aren't going to Happy Land, you're being torn apart.
He's a Colin Robinson.
Yes. He is a Colin Robinson. He will suck the life out of you. And so, yeah, like that is kind of how I see it.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's horrible.
Because that, for me, that has always been my biggest fear. And for me, that's more realistic than just going to a Happy Land somewhere else. Like, for me, that's
that
you're just stretched. Just
and
stretched,
disappear.
and then disappear and decompress and just die.
Oh, that's so bad.
Yeah.
I love that. I like that.
So I kind of lost my train of thought there, but for Inky, like he's not a survivalist, but he has gone through shit.
Yeah. He's got street smarts, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can survive in the frigid cold.
And that's why he was stuck there for a year, and he actually had to get his pirate crew to save him.
Wow.
And like they kind of lost quite a few people in that whole run, so there's animosity in the fact that Inky was stuck there at all with himself. Like he has that animosity of, you know, I know that I'm a pirate. I know that they really shouldn't come for me, but I feel like I was a family to them, and I thought that they were. And they left him there for a certain amount of time. And then when they did actually kind of come, it was kind of like he had already been broken at that time.
Because so much had happened.
How
does Inky end up in the gulag?
So I'm not 100% sure how that happened. I know it was due to a criminal act. It could even not have been due to a criminal act. It could have just simply been that he was Romani and they were questioning him and he didn't answer it right and they just took him.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
So then the Korshkan are kind of like at the height of Soviet rule then.
If
they're going to, which would be kind of cool because then you could have resistance groups.
Yes.
And that are clinging to traditional Korshkan values.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it would be kind of cool to explore that where like, you know, you meet these characters who seem kind of bland when you meet them, but then like, you know, they see that he's in need or there's characters in need and they invite them into their homes and you see like all these bright colors and like, I mean, cause like when I think of Russia, I think of like everything was just red and blue and yellow and green and like all these really beautiful bright colors. And like, I think that would be so cool. And like, they have like this tradition and they smile and they're warm.
Yes.
And then like, they're like, okay, we'll help you. And like, it would be really cool to have that sort of resistance group there.
Yes.
And I think that would show another side
of Russia,
of Russian culture where it's like, it's not fair to say that they're just a bunch of quiet, subdued people because
they weren't really.
They aren't, you know, there's so many people trying to speak out, even though like to this day, you could be imprisoned for it.
Yes. Yeah. And that actually like, because, and like the way that I see it happening too, is that Inky actually had a Korshkan member on their ship. Like his name's Yuri and he was a member on the ship, but he also came from the Korshkan Empire and he was a part of those resistances. So I can see
really cool.
Him using those resistances to get Pinky out.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
So, okay. So the gulags, I actually kind of like the idea of Inky for the first time in his life not doing anything wrong and then getting like imprisoned for it in the worst place possible. Just for being himself. Because he's Romani.
And there's no hiding it. Like there's just he just
absolutely not. And then unfortunately he always was with Yuri, but he never like kind of asked him about his culture. Yuri wasn't really, he hadn't broken those walls yet with Yuri.
Well, they would like when the Polizia would stop Yulia and Mercy was Filipino working there because her husband worked for the embassy.
Mm-hmm.
And they would go places sometimes and they would both get stopped. And sometimes they were just looking for you, trying to bait you. And that's like one reason that the Americans' families had diplomatic immunity in Russia, because the police will bait you into doing something wrong, or they'll just do something wrong and blame it on you. So that they have a reason. And it doesn't have to be anything other than they just didn't like the way you looked at them.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Or if they saw that the car didn't have a Russian plate and, like, you know, it was an EU plate or something like that, they would purposefully pull you over just to hassle you. And even Americans who, with the diplomatic immunity, you can't get tickets.
Yes.
So you'd have to go to the RSO's office to get a ticket overturned, and it was a big thing. But they would still give Americans tickets even though they knew they weren't supposed to.
Yeah.
Simply to hassle them.
Oh my God. That sounds, oh God. That sounds fucking awful. Okay, so Inky was most definitely targeted by the policia.
And you would have people like watch you and follow you sometimes. And you'd have to like duck out into buildings and kind of get lost in crowds.
That's insane. They just sound so dangerous.
It was kind of scary sometimes.
God, fuck.
You got really street smart living there. And
you'd think that Inky being street smart.
But see, sometimes if you let your guard down,
and you
don't expect somebody to, you just don't expect that sort of hatred targeted towards you for doing nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
That's when people would swoop in and do shit.
Yeah, and I actually really like the fact of him for the first time in his life not actually doing anything and getting caught for something he never did.
He never even did.
Yeah.
You know, like they could plant an apple and say, well, you stole an apple or you stole bread.
Yeah. Oh my God. And
while people are waiting in a bread line.
Oh my God. Okay, yeah, I kind of like that. So
I just really want to see little cats in their babushka scarves.
That actually sounds so cute. And I think I do like, because you made that mention that
the old ladies turn into tiny tree trolls.
Well, not only that, but just like the idea of them technically being bald cats.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of love the idea of them just being those Sphinx cats. And like, there's a variation of Sphinx and like other variations of just like balding felines mostly.
Although if they were bald, they really wouldn't survive.
That is true.
And I feel like evolutionarily speaking, they would have probably I feel like I envision them as the cats with the really thick fur.
The almost Maine Coon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the Norwegian forest cat.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. So we can probably say
still kind of balding, the old man. And somehow like managed to get a cat with like a scruffy beard.
Yes. Oh, actually, let me go ahead and check on Waves of Time really quick.
Oh yeah. Like a white cat with like salt and pepper all around his mouth.
I actually really love that. We might actually have to like do this stream again to get more info.
Oh yeah, because it's 7:15.
Yeah. But at the same time, like I have a better understanding of the Russian culture at the very least. And that is what I needed, honestly. And I love, we got to write that down. The idea of them being Soviet currently. And the concept of resistances against that rule. And how the resistance holds on to the old ways, essentially. So more color and vibrancy and warmth.
And like Russian music that's like bright and loud and
bright and loud. And that cold, that cold variation, that cold stark deviation from that being the Soviet.
Yeah, where the environment is cold, the Korshkan were warm at one point.
That's actually really sweet. That's all. It's the same with the Russians.
Yeah, and then communism made them cold.
Actually, really sad.
Which is why I get really irritated when people are like, "We need to be communists." I'm like,
no,
please go to a country where that happened and see what happened to those people, because it's so unfair to everything they've gone through for you to think it's going to work.
All right. Well, I think that is all the time that we have for tonight because Pam just texted me, said that she was saying that she has set up.
Okay.
So next time we will most likely either do more branching talks on the Korshkan Empire, considering the fact that we still need to figure out like what their history is, things along those lines. Because of course, I'd love to take all of Russian history and put it in there, but we do have to come up with our own original ideas. So next time we'll go ahead and do that. And thank you all for hopping in if you did. And if not, see you next time. Hope you have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Go ahead and end the podcast. Boop.